Mr. Foster, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today. You've obviously been part of the audience and seen the format, so you can say anything that you want to, essentially speaking, and then the panel will seek clarity on anything and have a discussion with you about it, if that's okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
For all persons here listening in and out the room, my name is Tony Foster, a Cheltenham resident for 20 years. I and my family have been occasional users of A&E at both Cheltenham and Gloucester. Nothing life-threatening and only one overnight stay. I was for 6 years a non-executive director at the Hospital Trust, finishing my appointment last year. During that time, I became familiar with most aspects of both hospitals' operations and at various times was chair of Finance and Charitable Funds Committees and a member of the Quality and Audit Committees. I was familiar with the discussion and conclusion a few years ago to change Cheltenham A&E to a consultant-led centre for only daytime and evening. And in the last year, we had started discussions on the pressures on A&E and other possible options for emergency and urgent care at both Gloucester and Cheltenham, but not coming near to any conclusions. Since leaving the board, I've had no contact significantly with directors, but have attended members' meetings, most recently in September, and I also attended a workshop on urgent care at Churchdown on the 8th of October. I want to emphasise that I do not advocate or share a strong view about A&E at Cheltenham. I'm not going to address that. There's plenty of other people who've got expertise and ideas on that, and I've heard from some already. But since it has been an option, and whether or not yesterday's announcement in Parliament means it still is, to concentrate real emergency, life-threatening expertise in one place, what I would like to do is explore, if that were to be a case, what would be a good situation for urgent care in Cheltenham, because I have felt there's been a bit of a vacuum, possibly understandable in that you engage and you consult before you decide. So I've taken the risk or the temerity of speaking to you experts about some ideas that I had if there was to be a change in Cheltenham. But I emphasise I'm not advocating it, I'm just exploring ideas.
Okay.
And in doing that, I'd like to explore the important things to get right, the criteria for judging success when evaluating these, and eventually implementing the preferred solution. I am not medically trained, and the views are entirely my own. If I make any wrong assumptions, I'd be very grateful to anyone who can correct me. So why is this issue so important and needs evaluation and possible change? A few years ago, we had great difficulty recruiting enough consultants in emergency medicine to fully staff 2 A&E centres 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At one time, I believe we were down to only 12 full-time consultants. The consultants' view at that time, and most importantly the view of senior deanery staff at Bristol, was that 2 24-hour centres was not safe or sustainable. The deanery view was crucial because without their approval, they would not supply the junior doctors for training, which are a crucial part of the staffing of an A&E department. So that led to the change at Cheltenham, about which, of course, there are still strong views. But since making that change, the hospital has been able to recruit more consultants, and I believe the number is about 20 now. And one of my roles at the hospital was to chair consultant appointment committees, and I recall a number of applicants for emergency medicine saying they felt keen to apply to Gloucester hospitals because we had made that change and established more stable staffing levels. But nothing stands still, and there have been fresh challenges facing A&E in the county. The number of people presenting themselves at both hospitals has increased every year, and so has the number needing to be admitted for a stay in the hospital. There's been great difficulty in meeting the national requirement to treat 95% of attendees within 4 hours. In fact, the hospital has twice been placed in special measures by NHS Improvement because of the poor performance. Great advances continue to be made in the options and effectiveness of treating patients, not just the skills of doctors and nurses, but the use of analytical and diagnostic machines, which are very expensive and need specialist staff to operate them. That is why there is talk of, but I believe no decision, to concentrate the expertise of emergency life-threatening treatment at one centre, possibly Gloucester, which would be a centre of excellence comparable to anywhere in the country. I repeat, I am not going to state the case for or against such a change. What I am interested in is what would be provided in Cheltenham if that change were thought to be the best, or what a part of an option of the eventual solutions. Unlike some of the speakers, I do not represent constituents, but I listen to friends, colleagues, the press, and I've drawn a few views I think are around, and I'll express them. Common views that people have about A&E centres. I want a hospital as near as possible to me. Once in a hospital, I will be safe in the hands of the best possible care. I know I have a good chance of being seen within 4 hours in an A&E compared to the time it may take me to get a GP appointment. I'm worried and upset about the thought of travelling for even 15 minutes in an ambulance when I could have been having treatment. I may understand the concept of world-class emergency treatment in one place, but that won't happen to me. It's ordinary accidents I'm concerned about. I understand and have faith in something called A&E, but I have no idea and no faith in anything less than that. Now, facts and reasons for challenging these views could be produced, but that's not my task today. A&E departments are developed into very different entities from their origins. The term A&E is embedded deep in people's minds and just trips off the tongue. But it treats quite different conditions in the same place, with the same facilities and the same staff. You quickly identify attendees as major and minor cases, and understandably, prioritising major life-threatening cases and availability of hospital beds can have a significant effect on waiting times and the general experience of the non-emergency cases. I sometimes wonder, why did we ever devise a system which had these clashes so evident? If you just, either as a patient or someone in the hospital, observes what can happen when the 2 or 3 major crises occur. So, as part of the concentration of emergency treatment in one centre of excellence, the idea has been floated of some other form of centre. I call it an urgent treatment centre, but I just use that term lightly. That name and type of centre is used in parts of the UK already, but what we might have doesn't have to be identical to others. I believe some are staffed by GPs, but it doesn't have to be like that. We might decide to use experienced A&E staff, including a number of consultants. It would be a place to go to if you needed urgent medical attention, but it's not a life-threatening situation. Things like sprains and strains, minor head injuries, minor scalds and burns, suspected broken bones, ear and throat infections, skin infections and rashes, eye problems, fevers, abdominal pains, vomiting, diarrhea. The list goes on, it's not set in stone, and it could be developed in consultation between the community and doctors. What would be the features that people might like to see in such a centre? As has been mentioned several times, clear guidance provided online, via GP surgeries, via the 111 service, perhaps via pharmacies, and of course ambulance crews would know exactly where to go. Fully staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as stated in this booklet, Fit for the Future. Accidents or symptoms occur at any time. There's a very clear statement seen in here. We see both Cheltenham General and Gloucestershire Royal Hospitals continuing to provide a range of same-day, walk-in, urgent care services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for local patients. That seems very, very clear to me. I could almost say it was a commitment. But that statement, although it's there, I've not been able to discover any ideas about how it would be delivered and with what advantages. You may say, be patient, we can talk about that. But I'm, as some of my colleagues in the room know, not always very patient. So I've created my own ideas. What else might people want? That the service should be better than the current 4-hour standard. We don't meet it, or very rarely with difficulty. It is not going to be inferior to a centre for emergency care, but excellence in its own right for what it does. One of the things that worries me is talking about a centre for excellence, which I understand, not only in emergency medicine, but elsewhere. Anything else which is in the same field, it is not a centre of excellence. People think, well, it's got to be inferior. Well, it doesn't have to be. And I'll talk about standards by which it could be far, far better than we already deliver. If the really life-threatening, dangerous situations were done in a different place, patients in an urgent treatment centre could, for the most part, not be given any priority. If genuine emergencies would be treated elsewhere, wouldn't it be possible to treat each person in the order in which they arrived? Rather like the blood test service. You take a numbered sticker and you know exactly where you are in a queue. I mean, it is totally understandable, but slightly distressing and unnerving to see other things happening when you think, well, I thought I was next, but there's no such capability at the moment. It should be readily accessible in the centre of Cheltenham, preferably on the current hospital site, with access to the necessary diagnostic and analytical machines and their staff. If I have to go to Gloucester instead, I want it made much easier to return. Finally, such a centre in Cheltenham should have sufficient expertise in at least some staff that if I should need to go to a centre of excellence in Gloucester, that decision will be recognised and arranged very quickly. So what might the criteria be for measuring the success of such a centre? It should have the united support of emergency clinicians. If we have a big argument between you guys, well, we're not going to succeed. It should gain a majority, preferably of support of Cheltenham citizens. It should be a better accident service than is currently managed. It should be able to minimise the number of patients needing to be transferred to Gloucester. The vast majority of emergency cases will be recognised straight away and sent direct to Gloucester. I say this because it happens. Less people should die in emergency care than happens at the moment. It happens, but the whole purpose of this is if you want to create the very best world class, that less people die in your care. A final suggestion. If such a centre can be devised for Cheltenham with all these advantages, then shouldn't Gloucester have the same as well? There would then be two, at least, excellent urgent treatment centres and one excellent emergency centre for the county. Such a solution may give a better service for the vast majority of patients who do not have life-threatening conditions and may also persuade people in Cheltenham they are not being treated less well than those in Gloucester. Some thoughts on next steps. It would be preferable if we could get beyond the simple trading of competing slogans, Save Cheltenham A&E or One Centre of Excellence in Gloucester. The subject is much too important and complicated and needs better articulation of the possible reasons for change, the options, their characteristics, the criteria for choosing, and the active participation of the community in voicing their views. Ultimately, though, this is not like a referendum. The statutory bodies, CCG, the hospitals, have to decide. Events such as these can play a part, but in my view, there is currently rather too much opinion and grandstanding and not enough objective information on which to take an informed view. It's relatively easy to shout loudly in defence of the status quo. We need to start to hear of the advantages for everyone, not just life-threatening cases, of an urgent treatment centre in both Cheltenham and Gloucester. There's a dilemma in engagement and then consultation in not stating a preferred solution too early, or even describing options and then being accused of already having made the decision. But in my view, if more information could be made available, it would help for a more informed debate. Things like, what conditions are appropriate for UTCs and what are not? What type and number of staff would be needed to run a UTC? What standards of excellent performance might such a centre meet compared with today's A&E? How many patients would be treated in each of the UTCs? How many in the emergency centre? Would there be an identical UTC in Gloucester, perhaps elsewhere in the county? Are there any cost implications for such a change, either greater or less, and in both capital and revenue? So, summing up, I feel there's been a danger that the current engagement process is taking place in too much of a vacuum of information. You cannot expect ordinary citizens to know all the facts and complexity, but that doesn't mean their views are not extremely important. But more information has to be provided from our NHS bodies before we citizens can give our best informed and reasoned views. We have the potential to turn the argument around from Cheltenham losing something considered sacred and valuable to gaining something far better than the current service, and so demonstrably so that Gloucester wants one as well. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, anybody questions? There's a model for you.
Thank you very much. That was very well put. You say to the end, you cannot expect ordinary citizens to know all the facts and complexities, and I totally agree with that. And in fact, when you talk about the common views about A&E, that there is a bit of a sort of plethora of fact and myth within there. So, for example, one of the points is I'm worried and upset about the thought of travelling for even 15 minutes in an ambulance when I could be having treatment. Now, I have to sing the praises of our ambulance service. We have, over the years, built the skills and competence of our paramedics. 50% of people are managed and treated in their own home without even needing to go close to our emergency departments. So I would suggest that 15 minutes, actually treatment is underway and significant treatment underway. So it's how do we work with the public to almost myth bust some of those facts around perceived dangers of being in an ambulance an extra 15 minutes.
I hope I made it clear. Those are not my views.
No.
They are possible views for a number of people.
Yeah.
And the more you can explain, I understand your point of view, but here's some facts that may change it.
Yeah, and how do we try and change some of that? Because you're right. I think there's what's coming through. So I'm not sure we are getting our messages across clear enough. And I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on how we do that.
Well, a few examples of what happens when, because in the last 2 or 3 years, patients have had to be transferred from Cheltenham to Gloucester. Not a lot. The first point is to make sure people know it hasn't been a great number of people, but it has happened. If you could say, for instance, not a single one of them died in the process, not a single one of them died when they got to Gloucester and were treated, I don't know if it's a fact, but just give some more assurance to what happened to people who had that experience. And the fact that treatment does go on. A few examples, what happens to people? You're not just sitting there hoping the driver doesn't have an accident. Just bring to life.
Bring to life.
Bring to life. I work in a number of public sector organisations. It's so easy to just pile out data and slogans. And I look at it and say, that hasn't got through to me. Give me a practical example. Give me a person who I can relate to. It could be fictional, but it's real. You know. I mean, this excellent wordy document, but my eyes glazed over a bit here and there with the ambitions, the work, the things. And I say, at the moment, I found a dearth. You may say it's inevitable, a dearth on what are the possibilities, please.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was going to say, Maria normally loves an example, and Maria, if Maria had had her way, this book would be about 150 pages thick at least, full of examples. But there's always the balance of how many examples, and I think you make a brilliant case for the citizens' jury, which is 5 days. 5 days of all that information, because we have to balance off how much to put in here to give us sort of soups on enough to make some decisions and have some views, versus too much to turn everyone off and look at it and think, I can't read that. And the balance, I think the beautiful balance is the citizens' jury, which will be 5 days of information from professionals, every question answered, all facts and figures coming out of your ears to make a decision at the end. And that's the balance we have to strike.
Yeah. But you probably go with my experience, I am capable of absorbing quite a lot of facts of it, and I can't even find them. I'm not talking about give 100,000 residents the stuff, but if it isn't even available yet on what might an urgent treatment centre look like, and more importantly still, why could it be better than the sacred A&E we've got at the moment?
Yeah. Anybody else want to chip in? No? Okay. No, I think that yeah, the point has been well made. I think it's a very good one, and I think it provides a lot of food for thought. Okay, as you rightly say, there's no judgment as to what the model might be, but certainly with regards to what you've just put across, I think that's something well worth looking into and considering. So, I thank you obviously very much for putting that across to us.
You're welcome.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of what we talk about is what we need to improve and the drivers to change. I'm not sure we're articulating things we actually want to build on. We're already doing
Well, that's what we can pick up from things like that, is we're keeping the notes, obviously, of that, and then look at what we can improve on afterwards.
Communication. I'm still not clear what's the best mechanism, best way to communicate.
Yeah.
our messages.
Okay.
And we're not getting.
I talked about the inventing rapid response.
Yeah.
We could fill it all in. There were some brilliant
I know.
examples of
Yeah,
where
I know.
hospital vision and A&E is avoided.
We don't celebrate success. We just don't enough.
But even if we celebrate it, we need to find a route of where people can hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that we're not going to be getting. I'm just going to say, we've got to 1:15 and you've not had a comfort break. If nobody's got any objections or unless there's any questions from the audience in here, I think we'll take a 10-minute comfort break if that's all right. So you've got a chance to do that. And then we'll reconvene at 5 minutes before we see Reach. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone.